Aloha! Welcome to the Bishop Museum Library and Archives. I'm science educator Hadley Anderson with our historian DeSoto Brown. And DeSoto, what are we talking about today?
Well, this is Throwback Thursday, as you know, and so every Thursday afternoon we do a short piece on some kind of historical thing. And today we're going to be looking at something which happened in the distant past but is related to something we just went through. So yesterday and last night there was a tsunami watch for much of the Pacific Ocean, including the Hawaiian Islands, because there was a significant earthquake in Chile, or off the coast of Chile, South America. And that's relevant to what we're going to discuss because similarly, back in May of 1960, there was an earthquake in Chile that did in fact cause a very significant tsunami. And that's what we're going to talk about. That's what I'm going to show you. So, in May of 1960, there was a series of really huge earthquakes in Chile. And Chile is on the coast of South America, and it has the misfortune of being where two continental plates collide.
Yes.
And so that means that there are lots of earthquakes, and there can be particularly significant earthquakes in what are called subduction zones, in which there's a plate, the ocean, running into a plate which is the edge of a continent, and where the plate goes under, the ocean plate goes under the continental plate, where they're now determining that that's the sources of the biggest earthquakes that happen on Earth.
Yes, we also have subduction zones over by Japan, which we had a tsunami from 2011.
Exactly. And there's also big concern about a subduction zone off the Pacific Northwest of North America, which is called a Cascadia subduction zone, which has caused huge earthquakes in the past and theoretically, well not theoretically, it will do it in the future. So, in 1960, May of 1960, there was a series of really significant earthquakes in Chile, and the largest of which has now been calculated to have been the biggest earthquake ever recorded, and now it's, after the fact, been determined to be 9.5 Richter scale, which is just unimaginable. Well, that earthquake caused a significant tsunami. Now, there was a tsunami warning system in effect in 1960. So people throughout the Hawaiian Islands, we did the same routine we're accustomed to. There were sirens, people evacuated. Unfortunately, lots of people in the city of Hilo, which is particularly prone to very damaging tsunamis, didn't evacuate. And the series of waves which struck on the night of May 22nd, May 23rd, 1960, ended up killing 61 people. That's pretty significant. So here's a photo. There's a photo for you to look at. And here's a photo for everybody else to look at. And this is of Kamehameha Avenue, which is the main street going through downtown Hilo. And the morning of May 23rd, 1960, the biggest tsunami struck just about 1 a.m., about earlier that day. And as you can see, the force of the tsunami was such that these parking meter poles were completely knocked down.
So how tall was that tsunami?
They think that this particular wave, because a tsunami consists of a series of waves, this particular wave was probably about 30 feet. That's huge. That's
a 3-foot tsunami can move small cars.
Yes.
So
right.
That's why I was wondering, these parking meters are in dire
and so
shape.
The only things that survived were the concrete buildings. Everything else was completely swept away to nothing. And that either the wave damage that you see, the posts bent over, that's either from just the sheer force of the water, which is possible, or when water is carrying debris, it's a lot more damaging because those solid objects get thrown into other things at very high speeds. So in the background, you can see right up here at the top is the Hilo Theater, and you can see the word Hilo written on the marquee. And those of us who live in Honolulu, and if you've been around for a while, you may remember the Varsity Theater. The Hilo Theater was just like the Varsity Theater, which was on University Avenue. So this used to be the heart of downtown Hilo, which is why there were parking meters there. And as you can see, it's all cleared away except for just some of those concrete buildings. Now, here's another photograph of the damage to Hilo in 1960, pardon me. And this is what was called Pio Pio Street, which was mostly residential. There were commercial buildings too. A lot of the buildings in Hilo were wooden buildings. They were wooden commercial buildings, and they were wooden homes. And they just got knocked to pieces, which is why 61 people were killed. Now, part of the reason people didn't evacuate was because the previous tsunamis had not damaged some of these areas. So they thought, okay, I'm out of the danger zone. And unfortunately, they were not. And of course, this was at 1 o'clock in the morning, so you couldn't see it coming, because it's complete nighttime. So people heard it, but by the time they heard the wave coming towards where they were, it was too late to get out. So that's why so many people were killed. Now, after this disaster, it was decided that the best thing to do is just get out of the way. So a lot of the areas that were destroyed or damaged were cleared of buildings. The property was condemned, and all this area that was downtown Hilo or residential is now parks. So that the next time there's a big tsunami in Hilo, we won't run into this many different things. Now, I mentioned that there was a warning system in effect. And the reason is that 14 years earlier, in 1946, there had been another devastating tsunami in Hilo. This is one of many historically. I mean, this is not the first time. April 1st, 1946, a tsunami generated by an earthquake in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska was equally devastating to Hilo, actually slightly less, I think.
I still think that they had about 100 deaths.
Oh yeah, they did. There were 150 or 60 deaths in all, and in Hilo proper, it was like 90 to 100 people were killed. And this one struck with no warning. So after this disaster, which actually was affected all of the Hawaiian Islands, it was the warning system was put into place. And unfortunately, as we saw in 1960, 14 years later, a lot of people didn't heed the warnings. But if you look at this photograph, it's not too dissimilar to the first one I showed you, because here's the Hilo Theater. Again, you can see the marquee of the Hilo Theater. So you can see the devastation and the destruction that occurred in both of those, in that same location for both of these different incidents. And here's another photograph of Kamehameha Avenue in downtown Hilo from 1946. And it was very fortunate that this wave happened to be in the early morning, just about at dawn. So some people saw it and were able to get away from it. But school hadn't started and people weren't in stores and offices. And this particular photograph I'm showing is of where there would have been a lot of people. There would have been shoppers. There would have been people in their businesses, etc. So fortunately, there were very few people to be in the way of this wave, to be killed. But nonetheless, it was still a terrible tragedy. So I think the end result of these two stories is to just say that we just had a potential tsunami incident yesterday. Fortunately, didn't come to anything specific or anything dramatic.
Now, of course, that earthquake was upgraded from a 7.9 to an 8.3, and it was off the coast of Chile. And Chile did get hit by a tsunami, about a 15-foot tsunami. Some people did die, but luckily we have our Pacific Tsunami Warning System with our DART buoys, which DART stands for Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis. And they can give us a good indication of the speed and severity as the wave is coming through, if it's coming to our neighborhood. Luckily we didn't. Now, I can also say, too, that when I was a kid growing up here, we used to have tsunami warnings quite frequently. Oh, really?
And particularly after this 1960 tsunami, they were, I think, a lot more cautious. So throughout the 50s and 60s, there were cases, I think, at least twice, where tsunami warnings occurred just a week apart from totally different earthquakes. Nowadays, it's not as likely that we'll have a warning for something that doesn't materialize into a big wave, specifically because of the buoys that you just mentioned, in which now we have a better sense of what the strength of the tsunami is.
Right.
And there's no way to be absolutely certain. I mean, it's not every earthquake generates one. It depends on whether there's a severe, significant motion of the ocean floor. So it's way down there at the bottom of the ocean. We can't see it. So we usually don't know until it's been generated and whether it's coming or not, and how big it's going to be. But now we have a much better sense of that. So
absolutely.
Last night we in Hawaii were very lucky. We dodged a bullet.
We did get a little bit of a wave.
Right.
Hilo, of course, got some of the biggest, which was under 3 feet, and it didn't actually make landfall. Of course, Honolulu, we got maybe about 2 or 3 inches.
Right.
Nothing really big to worry about. But even in that instance, especially with the storm systems that we've been having and stuff like that, it has taken the currents into a very, very weird pattern.
Right.
So if you're going to go swimming or anything
That's
like that,
right.
take the boat out.
And if you were mentioning the Japanese earthquake of 2011,
Yes.
that tsunami wasn't devastating. It did cause damage, particularly in the Kona area of
Yes.
the Big Island, but there were a lot of videos that people shot, amateur videos of the currents and the ocean doing all kinds of strange things for the rest of the day after that. Water going out, water coming in. So even a non-damaging tsunami does strange things that we can't always anticipate in the ocean.
Right. We have a great thing here at the Mission Museum. It's called our Science on a Sphere, and we have a lot of really beautiful data sets that show the wave propagation from the 1960 tsunami and from the 2011 Ocean tsunami, and even how the waves bounce even between the islands.
Yes.
And so that can increase the wave height, so that's why tsunamis are more than one wave. The successive waves can be even larger than the
That's
first
right.
wave.
And usually, as a rule, the first wave isn't the biggest one. And the other thing that's different, that's difficult to anticipate is tsunamis come from different directions every time. And there's all this topography underwater that we can't see. So, as Hadley just said, waves bounce off of things underwater that we can't anticipate. And so, what was a big wave last time is not necessarily a big wave this time. I mentioned the 1946 and 1960 tsunamis. Those were the most damaging ones. The 1946 tsunami damaged coastlines throughout the Hawaiian Islands. The 1960 was comparatively small everywhere except Hilo. So you can't just say, well, it was big here, therefore it won't be big there. We never know.
We've got great technology now, and the technology is always improving,
Yeah.
but always be wary.
Absolutely.
I guess.
Absolutely.
Don't get apathetic to these
No.
tsunami warnings, that's
No,
for sure.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so that's our Throwback Thursday for today, and we were able to throw in science as well as history, which is great. So again, we're talking to you from Bishop Museum, and if you want more information, definitely come to the Bishop Museum website, the address of which I am holding up right now, which is www.bishopmuseum.org. And we will see you, Hadley and I will see you next Thursday for another Throwback Thursday here in Periscope. Bye!